can be the difference between life and death. In my case, it was. And maybe for someone here, it will be too. I grew up in an ultra-Orthodox community called Lakewood, New Jersey. I grew up with 7 other siblings in the house. And growing up in a large family like this, it's very easy to get lost. All I wanted as a little girl was to be seen. All I wanted was to be heard. And the only person that saw me growing up was my big brother, Shua. Shua had a way of seeing me. Shua had a way of making me feel special. He always made my birthdays extra special. And one year, he got me this huge birthday card, and it says, "On your birthday, want to know how much I love you?" And when you open it up, there's this teddy bear, and it's holding these red balloons, and it says this much. One year, he got me these purple blinds to cover my window because I was using a sheet to cover my bedroom window. And this was Shua's way of showing me that he loved me, that I was loved. It was his way of showing me that I was special. One day, Shua came over to me, and he used to call me Shizzy, and he said, "Hey Shizzy, let's go to the mall." And I remember I was so excited because in my family, we never went to the mall. I'd never been to the mall, and so I knew I was going on this big adventure with my big brother. And so he arranged for us to take a bus, and as we're sitting there on the bus, all of a sudden he runs up to the driver, and he says, "Stop the bus, stop the bus." And it turns out we took the wrong bus, and so I get off the bus, and I'm standing there with my big brother holding his hand, and he tells me we took the wrong bus, so we're gonna have to get across the highway so we can hitch a ride to the mall. And so the cars are coming back and forth, and we run across, and we finally make it to the other side, and this red van comes screeching and asks us if we need a ride. And so we get into the car, and as we're driving towards the mall, I remember I saw this huge sign that said J.C. Penney, and I couldn't believe that we were going to go to a store that sold just pennies. My bubby always made it a big deal that shiny pennies were special, and I later learned that's not what J.C. Penney was. When we got to the mall, Shua bought me my first Build-A-Bear. And if you don't know what a Build-A-Bear is, it's a little stuffed animal, and you give it a little heartbeat, and you give it some stuffing. And this was Shua's way of showing me that I mattered. It was Shua's way of seeing me. One Friday night, it was a regular Friday night, and if you grew up in a Jewish home, you know the chaos that's going on a Friday before Shabbat. And I had gotten into a fight with my sister. Like all siblings do, we fought. And Shua got so mad at me, and he said, "This isn't how you speak to your sister. I'm not talking to you for the rest of the night." Little did I know that these would be the last words that Shua said to me. The next day was a regular Shabbat, and I remember my stomach was hurting me, and I was setting the Shabbat table. And after I put on the plastic tablecloth, right before I ran to grab the plates, there was a loud bang on the door. And so I stopped what I was doing, and the family dog was barking, and I went, and I opened the door, and I see these 3 men dressed in white shirts, holding a red first aid bag, and they look at me, and I look at them, and they said, "Where's the basement? You have the wrong house." I said. They pushed me aside, and they ran towards the basement. Next thing I knew, my sister was running upstairs, saying, "Daven if you want your brother to live. Say Tehillim if you want your brother to live." I remember I ran upstairs to the black railing that we had, and I was standing there, trembling, looking down, and for the first time, I saw my father, what looked like laughing, but with tears, and I couldn't understand why he was making these noises. And it took me a minute to understand that this was my father crying. The rest of the day went on where I was sent to my friend's house, and my brothers were sent to the neighbors, and my sisters were sent to the neighbors, and when I got to my friend's house, I told her what had happened. And I remember just telling her, "I want to go home. Something's wrong. I want to go home." And so she walked me home, and I remember the walk home. Every time I walked on the grass, I said, my brother's breathing. And every time I walked in the cement, I said, my brother's not breathing. And every time I walked on the grass, I said, he's breathing. And every time I walked in the cement, I said, my brother's not breathing. And this was the way that my 12-year-old brain was trying to grasp what was happening to me. When I got home, I went upstairs to my parents' room. My father was weeping in the bathroom, and my mom hunched over on the bed with her eyes bloodshot. And as the curious little girl that I was, I went over to her. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and I said, Mommy, where is he? And this was the moment that I heard the most two gut-wrenching words. He died, she said. And this was the moment that I became numb. This was the moment that I became filled with shame. Shua died of a drug overdose that night. And this was something that people didn't speak about. That Shabbos that day, I had the saddest Shabbos lunch I've ever had. My father sitting there holding the Kiddush cup, trembling, trying to get through Kiddush, while my mom was wiping her tears, while I, as a 12-year-old girl, was sitting there trying to grasp what was happening and where my brother was. When I went to school after my brother died, my teachers told me that when bad things happen to you, it's because of something bad that you did. And as I've grown up, I recognize that the only bad thing that I ever did was not speaking up. When Shua was 6 years old, he was molested by boys that were older than him. And the way that Shua dealt with these feelings was by numbing it, was by turning to drugs, was by staying silent. If Shua had a safe space to go to, he might still be here today. Silence didn't save Shua, and it won't save you either. I reread the letter that Shua wrote before he died, and what it says in this letter is to speak up. If you have a story to tell, speak about it. If you have something to say, speak about it. And as I say all this, Shua's yahrzeit happens to be tomorrow. And during this time, they say his soul is closer than ever. Thank you, Shua, for seeing me. This is just the beginning. I will make it my life's mission to make sure that others are seen, to make sure people have a safe space to go to speak up. How many of you are silenced because of shame? How many of you feel like you have a safe space to go to use your voice, to speak up? What I ask of each of you to do in Shua's merit is to do what his dying wish was, which was to speak up, to have those hard conversations. Let's come together and let's speak and use our voice and not stay silenced anymore. Shua died, and so he doesn't have a voice anymore. And as I stand here today, doing what Shua's dying wish was, asking us all to come together and to speak up. Thank you.